All right, let's dive into a huge question today. What even is truth? And more specifically, is there such a thing as objective truth? Something that's real whether we're here to see it or not. Because what if the very act of seeing, of just thinking about the world, actually changes the picture?
So, the material we're looking at today kicks off not with an answer, but with a challenge. It basically says, hold on a second. To anyone who uses the term objective truth, it asks them to pump the brakes. The point is, how can we even start to debate this if we haven't agreed on what those two words, objective and truth, really mean?
And that brings us right to the heart of it all. This is the central question for our entire explainer. What if we never actually get a direct, unfiltered look at reality? What if everything we perceive, everything we think we know, has to first pass through our own uniquely human lens?
Okay, so to get to the bottom of this, we first need to take a look at our usual assumptions about reality and truth. We've got to start by questioning the very ground we're standing on.
Most of us go through our day with a pretty simple idea of what objective truth is. It's the law of gravity, right? It's the fact that water is H2O. These are things that just exist out there in the world, and they don't care about our opinions or feelings. They just are.
But this is where our source material really throws a wrench in the works. It says, hey, this whole conversation might be built on a shaky foundation. If you and I can't even lock down a solid definition for objective and truth, then how can we possibly have a real discussion about it? It kind of suggests we're all using these big words without fully knowing what we mean.
And that brings us to the core concept of this whole argument, this idea of a human filter that stands between us and the world, shaping everything we think of as truth.
So what is this filter exactly? The source calls it our human model of reality. I like to think of it as the mental software our brain uses to process the raw, chaotic data of the universe. It's not reality itself, but it's a set of tools, like creating order, making distinctions, and building systems that helps us turn all that chaos into something we can actually understand.
And here's a perfect example of that. Just think about biology. We have this really elegant, complex system, right? Kingdom, phylum, class, order. It is incredibly useful for understanding how living things are related. But let's be honest, nature didn't come with those labels pre-installed. We invented them. We imposed that order to make sense of the wild, overwhelming diversity of life.
Or how about this one? We talk about day and night like they're two totally separate things. But in reality, it's just a smooth, gradual fade from light to dark. I mean, where exactly does dusk end and night begin? There's no objective line in the sand. We draw that line because it's a really useful distinction for organizing our time and our lives.
And this brings us to what might be the best analogy for this whole idea, the map. A city map is absolutely essential for getting around. But nobody would ever mistake the paper map for the actual living, breathing city. The map is a simplified model. It has to leave out millions of details, the people, the sounds, the smells, to give us a useful representation. This argument suggests our entire understanding of the world is basically a collection of these kinds of maps.
So, if our understanding is just a collection of maps, how does that change our relationship with the world itself? This is where we get to the crucial difference between our models and reality. And here it is. This is the real turning point. After explaining how all our truths rely on these human-made systems, the source drops this absolute bombshell of a sentence. It's a really profound and humbling idea when you think about it. All our neat categories, our clean distinctions, our elegant scientific models, they're reflections of how our minds work, not necessarily how the universe is actually put together. This table just lays out that difference so clearly. On one side, you've got our human model. It's built out of categories, it's ordered so we can understand it, and it's ultimately just a representation. But on the other side, you have what this argument calls reality itself, a seamless, unlabeled whole, not ordered by our concepts, and maybe something we can never directly access without our models getting in the way.
So if our models aren't objectively true, then what good are they? Well, this leads us to the final and maybe the most important part of this whole idea, finding a more useful way to think about truth.
And the source wraps up with this powerful plea for clarity. It's basically saying, let's stop using these big, intimidating words like objective truth, not because we want to win an argument, but because they often hide meaning instead of revealing it. The goal, it suggests, should always be clear, honest communication.
So let's just pull this whole journey together. First, everything we understand is filtered through these human models. Second, these models, as useful as they are not the same thing as reality itself. And third, if you follow that logic, the conclusion is that a purely objective truth,
totally separate from us, might be a concept that's just impossible for us to ever really grasp.
And that leaves us with one last big thought. If all our truths are just maps, well, maybe we've been asking the wrong question this whole time. Maybe the point isn't to ask if our map is a perfect one-to-one copy of reality. Maybe the much more important question is this: does this map help us navigate the world? Is it useful? Is it honest? And can we make it better? What do you think?